And welcome everyone to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. We appreciate you for tuning in, however, and from wherever you're tuning in. My name is Caleb. I am a startup junkie, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Jeff Ameriine and Davis McEntire. How's it going, guys?
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's going well. It's another beautiful day in paradise. And we are joined today by a friend of ours, Andrea Harding. She's the founder of a platform called Zipgig. It's a music booking platform, but I'm not going to go any further than that. I'm going to let her share that story. Andrea, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, Zipgig is a live music booking platform that I founded about 3 years ago. And what it does is it essentially takes all of the manual tasks that independent venues and bands go through to book gigs, and it puts it all together in one platform. So whereas currently venues might be using email or social media to receive requests from bands, or bands might need to reach out using multiple channels, all the pertinent information that both sides need in order to book gigs is built into my platform. So it makes booking gigs a lot easier. And it really reduces all the noise that gets associated with managing multiple communication channels. So yeah, it's great. I started it about 3 years ago, and I had intended to launch it in 2020, but COVID hit, of course, and changed the whole landscape for venues and any place where people gathered in person. And at the time I was living in California, and California was extremely constrained in the way of gatherings. And so I decided to hit the road and figure out what was out there and see if I could find some live music that was presented in a safe format in other parts of the country. And so I headed east and went through Denver and went through Austin and stayed in a bunch of cities. And I tested out Zipgig in different markets. And that was super helpful because I was able to get early traction, figure out what message worked with the right groups. And last year, I decided that I need to stop traveling and settle down permanently, and came to Fayetteville. I booked an Airbnb for a month, and I decided after one day that I was going to move and made this my home. And so I relaunched Zipgig in February of this year, and I've gotten really great feedback. Fayetteville and Northwest Arkansas and all the cities surrounding this area actually are really great music towns, really vibrant, all kinds of music, lots of different venues. And it's really just a matter of getting a team on the ground to onboard new venues and new bands to get even more traction.
Andrea, back us up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the origin story. So what were you up to before Zipgig?
Yeah. So I have been working in enterprise software and consulting for many, many years out in California in the Bay Area. And I'd always had an entrepreneurial spirit and a bug to launch something of my own. And I tried multiple endeavors. And, when one thing fails or just doesn't work, or you don't have the right product that you're bringing to the market, you try again. And so after multiple tries with consulting and kind of other products, I really wanted to make the switch into digital products. And I was keeping my eye out for an opportunity. And I come from a background where I did a lot of consulting and worked with companies on business process automation, which is how software automates things that are manual. You take for granted now everything we do almost everything is automated, but not even as little as like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, a lot of businesses were doing things that were extremely manual. And so I was looking for something that was manual. And I found it actually. I had a number of friends who were in bands, and I was out one day with a friend of mine, and we were at this popular bar that was in downtown San Jose, and there was a band setting up, and it was a great venue. And I had texted my friend, and I was like, "Where are you playing here?" And he said, "Well, we've tried. We've reached out to the venue. We emailed. We did this. We did that. We never heard back." And I thought, gosh, that's what you're going through to get yourself booked. I can automate that. And I started doing some early research, prototyping, interviewing, and I spec'd out what I was interested in. And then I put together a mock-up and I tested it again. I wanted to be sure, before I was going to go down this road, I really had something that was viable. And I got great early feedback. And that's kind of how I got here, really. This is just finding something that I could automate.
And the business model works in that the venues are the ones that pay, and is it free to the bands? Or talk a little bit about the business model.
Well, so I don't want to give away too much because we're still pretty early and we're kind of working out the details about how we're going to monetize, but there is definitely going to be a transaction fee.
Gotcha.
Free fee, because obviously the platform cannot subsist forever being free. And if you think about other popular platforms out there, there's either like a trial period or a freemium version. And so it is free right now because we want to get adoption. We're getting early feedback, and feedback that I'm getting is really good because I'm finding out where the platform is deficient. Nobody wants to pay for something if they feel like they haven't gotten value from it. And so I'm using this time for feedback and to create features that deliver more value. So yes, there will be a transaction fee, but this is a really green space. There's lots of ways that venues and bands need help. And so there's an opportunity for various subscription services, which I'm kind of testing a little bit. But yeah, definitely opportunities to monetize.
Got it.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know, Andrea, you said after a day, you knew you really wanted to kind of put down some roots here. What was that like? What kind of was that aha moment for you in Northwest Arkansas?
That's a really good question. It's tangible, but yet intangible. So I was in California for years and years and years, which if you've probably been there, it's just, it is beautiful, but it's super crowded, expensive, crowded. You have to wait for everything. And so when I hit the road, I tried all these different areas, and I went to Denver, crowded, Austin, crowded, Dallas, crowded. And so, where I'm at in my life, I wanted just a little more breathing room, but some culture and vibrancy. And there was something special about Fayetteville. I don't know if it was the downtown area or maybe just the being in the Ozarks with the greenery, because I love the outdoors. I love to mountain bike. I love to hike. It was really a combination of all of those things that felt like it was home for me, in addition to the community, so the people. So it's always really about people. When I lived somewhere that had great mountain biking and hiking and music, if I didn't have some attachment to the people, and I think in this area, people are genuine, they care about community, you build real connections, and that gives you a sense of feeling like you're home. And so when you're traveling around, you really have no home. You don't have a family. And I was going by myself. And so there's no family that you have. And I didn't really have friends. And so you need to have this sort of emotional connection to an area. And being here in Northwest Arkansas, I feel that it's very easy to build connection with people to give you that feeling that you're home.
And what a better place to start a music venue startup as well. What's kind of been the community reaction and feedback to that?
Well, so that's also a really, really good question. So I would say that it's almost the same everywhere I've gone. So it's a two-sided platform. So there's bands that onboard and there's venues that onboard. So bands are almost always open to the idea because A, it's free, and B, they'll take almost any avenue that will speed up their booking without them having to do a lot of manual processes. So most bands that don't have booking agents will email out and message out and use their network to get bookings. And the more they've been in business, the easier it is for them, but it still takes time. So bands are like, hey, I'll try it. Venues are always more challenging because they don't necessarily need the platform as much as bands do, but they do need it because it will save them a lot of time. They'll get good quality bands. We've automated a lot of manual processes. They just don't know it because they're hesitant to try new things. But what is interesting about Fayetteville, and I came from Austin, and so Austin is, as you know, probably it's a huge music town, right? Tons of live music there, lots of bands. But what I thought was really interesting about Austin that I see differently here in Fayetteville is that even though Austin is now a big tech town, there was some hesitancy to try tech. And it's very much a handshake town. Relationships matter. And so to get inroads, I kind of was challenged. I would have needed to be there so long to create relationships. And here in Fayetteville, I find it very open. People are willing to try the platform, even venues. Like they'll just try it. And I don't know if it's sort of the southernness or just the openness of people. They're just really willing to give it a shot. Whereas I felt like in Austin, people were a little bit more closed off, which is often the case in big cities. But because this is not a big area yet, people are still more open. And so it's great that way. And what's also really nice too is it's not just Fayetteville, it's, things north. You've got Springfield. To the west, you've got OKC and Tulsa. and then Little Rock. And each one of those areas are their own little music personality areas. And so I can onboard bands that are from Fayetteville, for example, and then market them to Tulsa venues or Springfield venues or Little Rock venues. And it's a different sound than like a Tulsa band. And that's really appealing. And so it kind of broadens the market space. And bands love to travel, right? They'll be willing to travel, 2 to 4 hours for a gig. And so I like that aspect of it. This is a small area, but each little geographic area around it's got its own little personality.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned kind of, of course, the bands are easy to get on the platform. Venues, maybe not so much. Who's that ideal venue customer? I mean, you think about like a place like George's, they have kind of like in-house booking, and so they might not be as ideal. So what's that sweet spot for you as far as like the kind of folks you want to approach?
I would say the sweet spot is breweries, wineries, cafes, restaurants. So exactly as you said, places that don't. So George's is not the ideal venue because they do their booking so well. They get great bands through there. They don't need Zipgig. They might be willing to try, to fill a Tuesday night or something, but their lineup is so good. They just don't need Zipgig. But breweries where music is an afterthought, where music is kind of background noise. Like, brewers don't know about live music, or maybe people who own the brewery aren't even brewers. And they just want to bring live music in. And so they don't know where to start. They don't have a network. What kind of band? Like, do we pay them? What's the best night? Do we charge a cover? They don't have any of that information. They've never even maybe booked even events. And so that's the ideal customer because they really could benefit from a platform like Zipgig. And we've got a built-in booking agreement. We've got a booking checklist to help them prepare for their event. And that's really my ideal user. And that's where I've gotten the earliest traction, I will say. So I avoid clubs just because they don't typically need my help, but those other venues do.
The Arkansas Inc. podcast provides an in-depth look at the latest industry trends in Arkansas from decision makers, business leaders, and executives. The Arkansas Inc. podcast has focused on a range of business and economic development topics, including small business and entrepreneurship, international business, fintech, workforce development, and community development. Each episode, which are about 30 minutes long, features business leaders and subject matter experts in conversation with knowledgeable members of the AEDC team. Recent guests have included Governor Asa Hutchinson, UAMS Chancellor Dr. Cam Patterson, Conductor Managing Director Dr. Jeff Standridge, and representatives from companies including Amazon, Walmart, IBM, Ozark Integrated Circuits, and more. The goal of the podcast is to help provide more information about Arkansas and its strong business environment to help business owners and executives make the decision to move to or expand in Arkansas. The Arkansas Inc. podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and other podcast apps. Just search for Arkansas Inc. To learn more or subscribe to Arkansas Inc. podcast, visit arkansasedc.com/podcast.
It's a good insight there because the breweries, it's still growing. We're not quite to saturation yet, although there are a bunch here. And they've all realized they're in the experience business. They make most of their money through the taproom beer sales. Some of them do food, some of them don't do food. Some of them have food trucks that are in proximity. But music or entertainment of some type is what keeps people there drinking beer. And so I think it's a great insight. And you're right. Most of them, they either come from a background not anywhere in the universe of running an experience-based business, or if they do have some of that experience, they know it's important, but they don't necessarily want to have the infrastructure in place to do it themselves. So I think that's a good insight. Very solid.
I try to go after the revenue play, which is as you said, like, how do they make money? People sitting in the seats, drinking beer or drinking whatever, eating food, and music will definitely keep them there longer. It will keep them coming back. It will keep them inviting their friends. And it's a good return on investment.
What have been the biggest challenges for you so far as you've gone through? I know it's still kind of early days with the relaunch, but what are you being challenged by right now as you move it forward?
Too much to do and not enough time to do it. So I'm a solo founder and I do everything. I have a team that does the development, but even just beyond the development, there's sales and marketing, there's product management, there is a whole host of things that you do. And so for me, it's just being spread really thin. So this summer, I'm bringing on a team of interns, and I'm super excited about that.
Excellent.
Because I tell you, I mean, if you talk about intern opportunity, interns love music, and for them to go out and get bands on the platform and get venues on the platform, it's very exciting. And so I'm starting a team of about 6 interns next week. And so they're going to help me onboard bands and talk to venues and do sales marketing. So social media is something that takes a long time. Email marketing, same thing. And for a startup, early traction is key. Like if you don't have, you can have the best product in the world. Like the platform that we've built is pretty good. I obviously it's mine, but so much thought has been put into the flow of things. But if I can't get early traction and I can't do enough sales and marketing, it's just going to die. And so my challenge has been not having resources to help me. And we're looking to really make some headway this summer with the interns. And I'm pretty excited about that. And another challenge is it's always money, right? It comes down to money, because if you have money, you can hire people. And I've been bootstrapping Zipgig the whole time. And, it's funny, like if you're an entrepreneur and you launch things, like you really tap into this well of strength and grit that you have to have. And so our initial setback was COVID. And now everyone's talking about the recession that's coming. And so I had planned to go out and do some fundraising, but now I am genuinely concerned about the recession, because with the recession, typically people are not spending discretionarily. So entertainment is typically discretion income. And if people don't have that income, they don't go out. And investors don't want to invest in a startup that is geared 100% towards entertainment. So I'm continuing to bootstrap. And it's a really good exercise because it really gets you to be able to do things on the cheap. Like you just learn to really hire interns. They will work not for a lot of money.
No, we're big believers in that. And as part of that, we've often thought that businesses like yours can benefit greatly from platforms like WeFunder, for example, because you're able to get to those retail non-accredited investors. And it's also an opportunity to raise visibility in what you're doing. A lot of the people that might write $100 or $1,000 checks could either be band members or people in the business and music and venues. Have you thought about heading that way, doing things like a WeFunder campaign?
Yes, I have thought about WeFunder and doing crowdfunding. I'm backing away from it a little bit right now because I want to get more traction on the platform, and at least until we can get to the point where I turn on the revenue model. So once we start making money as a platform, then suddenly the platform is much more interesting to investors. And at that point, it's just really a matter of scale. Equity crowdfunding is interesting, but it really requires a lot of upfront time.
It does.
So there's making of videos and, doing a lot of your own sales and marketing. And I thought to myself, do I really want to invest my time right now? Or do I want to spend time going out there, talking to venues, talking to bands? And that is really my love. Like my love is not behind my laptop, sending out emails and doing that. Like my love is being out with the people, going to see music, talking to venues, figuring out what their challenges are, figuring out if music can help them. And so I think my time is a little bit better spent now doing that versus running a crowdfunding campaign. And I can stretch out the bootstrapping a little bit longer. And what I've been told is the longer you can bootstrap and the more revenue you can get, the more attractive you are as an investment opportunity.
100% true. As an active early stage investor, I can tell you that's one you can take to the bank. That's guaranteed. Changing gears a little bit. Given the business you're in, what are some of the coolest, not well heard of bands or emerging bands that you've run across? I know that's an unfair question, but what are some of your favorites that you've tripped across? I'm really, really curious what's emerging.
Gosh, that's a good question. Well, so my interns that I talked to today that I'm bringing on next week, they had some really good suggestions. So I don't, here in Arkansas, I've seen people recently that I thought were really good. So I saw this lady, her name is Rachel Annals. I'm going to contact her and get her on the platform. She is wonderful. She imbues so much vitality, and she's a one-woman show. Modeling is a band that's on the platform. I don't know if you guys have heard of Modeling, but they are Fayetteville-based. I think they all went to the University of Arkansas. Young guys, 3 brothers are in the early 20s. They have really big following. And I contacted them out of the blue and I said, hey, I've got this platform. Would you be willing to try it? And so they did. They just released their first single, and I'm trying to get them booked in a brewery in Joplin. And they're going to make it big, I think. They're going to be big. They've got a great following and just sort of that brotherness. It's like the Jonas Brothers, right? People just gravitate towards that family kind of vibe. Let's see, what's another one? Gosh, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that's really stood out. But I'm in search, and my interns are going to do that. They're on Spotify, and they're looking for the next latest and greatest thing.
That's awesome.
Love it. Andrea, can you walk us a little bit through the kind of automation process and what that build out was? Like, where'd you guys start? What does it look like today?
So I just started with what do you do? What are the steps that you do to get yourself booked? And I took those pieces of information. So it's, from a venue perspective, like, what do they look for in bands? They look for marketability. They want to know if you have a following. They want to know what your sound is. Yes. They want to know what your following is, essentially, like how many people you can bring in the door, because that really is what the venue cares about. They do care about sound, but going back to that revenue play, they want people in the door eating and drinking. And so I looked at it from the venue side. What are all the components that you need? And then from the band side, I said, how do you market yourself? And what are the steps that you take to contact venues? And so, a lot of bands don't know how to market themselves. And so marketing is having really good pics, having good videos, having a description that speaks to the venues. And so I created a profile system on both sides where venue and band create their profile. And I included all of those elements that both sides are interested in. And then created a chat window where they can chat back and forth. And then once they negotiate the details, so if you negotiate through email, all of that process now is built into the platform, especially now with my booking agreement. So whereas they were using disparate channels before, I put that all into one platform. And so nobody really technically has to leave the platform. Now we're making improvements with how well the chat works and a few other things. Like, it's always about, improvement and iterating and stuff. But just all those disparate channels that they were using before, now it's all in one platform. So you stay in the platform. And the automation piece comes is, if you think about, if you've gotten 100 emails, if you're a venue, you've gotten 100 emails from bands and you're answering all those emails. That is in itself 100 siloed pieces of communication. And now on Zipgig, it's all in the platform. So I brought it together. Yes, you have a different message thread for each band, but you don't need to go out. And you have one profile. So if I'm a band and I create my profile, that one profile can be viewed by 100 venues, 1,000 venues. I don't have to go send an email to 1,000 venues to get them to go look at my profile. So you create a profile one time, and then that gets used as many times as many venues are all in the system who want to view it.
No, I love that. Yeah.
So yeah.
And
it's like dating, actually. Dating, like, if you use a dating app, you got to make yourself look as good as possible. So,
right, exactly. You got to pick those pictures really, really well.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
What does winning look like moving forward?
So I'm looking to get critical adoption here in this area. So I've designated this as my geographical area, which includes Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri, and then North Texas. And so I don't know how many bookings that's going to be. I will inherently figure it out when I get there. I will know, like, we've gotten adoption here. We've worked out all the kinks in the platform. We're good to go. Then we can start expanding to adjacent areas. So let's say I got a bunch of venues in North Texas and I got a bunch of bands in North Texas. Then I can go back to Austin because those North Texas bands are going to want to get booked in venues in Austin. And then the venues in North Texas might want bands in Austin. And so once you develop your core area, then you can expand adjacently. We start adding adjacent markets. Then I can add Memphis. Then I can add Atlanta. And so it builds on it that way. And where success? Where do I go? At some point I'm going to want to exit. What is that going to look like? Is that 5 years? Is that 10 years? I don't know. And, I'm at a place in my life where I don't want to spend the next 20 years working, but it's definitely a passion that I see myself doing for the next absolute 5 to 10 years. No question. We just want to grow, and we want to bring live music to places and make it easy where you might have a hard time booking. it's not even breweries and wineries. It's like a backyard, event. You're hosting something in your backyard. You need a band. Open up Zipgig, scroll through the bands, reach out, message them, book it right there. Take care of the payment right there. Done. So
yeah, awesome. And then as a Delta native, I feel like there's a lot of ripe opportunity of, bubbling young talent that has not yet been accessed over there.
Oh, totally. Well, so this intern that I had yesterday, his name is Christian. He's great. He was already on Spotify. I hadn't even thought about Spotify. I was so focused on Facebook and Instagram to find bands. And he goes, oh, I went to Spotify and I looked at who had a following on Spotify and where they're located. And he came up with bands that I had not heard of. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. And so if there's a band on my platform that's on no other platform, then yes, you do feel like, wow, they got booked on Zipgig. Zipgig must be the place to go to get like this unheard talent, right?
We've got a cool tip for you in that regard. And this is one I bring up every time we talk about music. But when we had the startup crawl back in April, there was a guy that we booked that was a recommendation of one of our team members named Akeem Kemp. Mm-hmm. He's a blues guitarist, and he reminds me a lot of a young Jimi Hendrix. Mm-hmm. And so the guy played his entire set with a broken hip on stage. Standing up, he had a broken leg, and he went through the whole thing and played the guitar behind his head. And amazing. He drew everybody in. So that might be somebody you want to look out for. And where, Caleb, do you remember where he's based?
He's based out of Morrilton, I think, Morrilton, Conway area.
Yeah. So he's in the central Arkansas, but he's somebody to look out for. Have your interns do some research on Akeem Kemp, because I think he'd be great on your platform.
Yeah, he was a great artist.
And half of the acts that we did have for Startup Crawl were booked through Zipgig. So a couple of the ones that we had at satellite location and stuff were Zipgig acquired acts.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for trying the platform. I was really
absolutely
happy. Yeah.
Well, one of the things we like to do when we get to the point where we want to land the plane is we ask you the time machine question. And that is, if you could take all the accumulated wisdom you have now after running Zipgig and all your other experience with startups and go back 5 or 10 years, some point in the past, what advice would you give your younger self?
To just go for it. Just go for it. You always feel like you don't know enough or you don't have enough experience. And I do feel like women oftentimes feel that way more so than men do. I've noticed that younger men will oftentimes just go for it. So if I could say something to myself, just go for it. Maybe you don't know everything. You'll figure it out. Like I didn't know, what I didn't know 3 years ago, I know now. And I don't know what's going to happen in a year from now, but as you said, you have experience and you learn how to critically think and you will figure it out. I would tell myself, just don't wait. What's the right time, right? If you find an opportunity, go for it. Even if it doesn't work out, you learn so much. Like I tried to be an independent consultant, have my own consulting practice after I left my last corporate job, and it didn't work out. It wasn't the right thing for me, but I learned so much about marketing that I never knew before. And I was able to use that experience here. So even if you do something and it doesn't work out, you've learned something and you can apply it in your next endeavor. So I always say, just go for it, and don't listen to other people, because for every one person who's there to support you, you'll have 10 people shoot down your idea. Don't do that. It's a bad idea. I have that even today, really. People will challenge the work that we've done, whether it's viable, and you have to really shut that down and figure out your market. I found a market that was really just ripe for change and some innovation. And I'm very focused on that market and the needs of that market. So you got to trust yourself, I think.
Great advice.
Yeah, I love that answer. It's a great answer.
Okay, for our listeners in 100 plus countries, if they want to learn more about you, connect with you, learn more about Zipgig, what is the best way they can reach you and learn more?
Well, certainly LinkedIn is probably the best way. LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Andrea Harding. I'm sure you could find me there. Zipgig.io. So that's our website. And you could check it out. If you're a band, you can create a profile. If you're a venue, you can create a profile. And That's it. We don't have a podcast. We don't have a podcast.
Not yet, right?
That's why you're on here. That's why you're on here, right? Hey, thanks for coming on, and best of luck to you. And we're really glad that that through your travels, you picked Northwest Arkansas as your place to kick this off and to be. It means a lot, and best of luck to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me and support Caleb during Startup Crawl. I really appreciate you guys trying the venue, and looking forward to more Startup Junkie events.
Sounds good. All right. Have a great day.
Okay, you too. Okay.
Bye.
Ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, chambers of commerce, mayors. If you're interested in taking your economic future into your own hands, we've got a book that can help you. Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the guide. It's a little bit inspiration. It's a little bit toolkit. What it will allow you to do is take your economic future into your own hands and build a sustainable small business, innovation, and entrepreneurial ecosystem in your backyard. If you'd like to hear more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. The Startup Junkie podcast reaches over 100 countries and has had over 100